All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of my podcast. This is Kati Gostaspi, and welcome to the Kati G podcast, specifically this sub-series of my podcast, Women Lawyers Making a Difference. So if you've been listening to my podcast, you know the mission of my podcast is for us as women to realize that we really are great and fantastic, and that we can be even greater. And most importantly, how are we going to bring this greatness and all this wisdom and knowledge that we have to the world through our brand? Okay. So the reason I do this podcast is twofold. One, I really care about humanity deeply, and I want us all to see how great we are as women, as lawyers, as people, so that can we just be happier and take some time for ourselves and enjoy the economics, the money that we're making, rather than running around like crazy. And the second reason I do this podcast is, look, I'm just like you. I'm not perfect. I struggle with my own feelings, imposter syndrome, what's going to happen tomorrow, worries, just like everyone else. I just teach this stuff, so maybe I'm a couple of years ahead of everyone listening on this podcast, but some days are tough for me too. Many days are tough. So we all need support, and that is the point of this podcast, that we all support each other through it. So today I've got a treat for you all. I have got the amazing Judy Perry Martinez, and Judy is of Counsel with the firm of, let me get this straight, Simon Peragine Smith and Redfearn in New Orleans. And she is also, just as important, in my world, more important, past president of the American Bar Association. And that's where I really got to know Judy over the years. So welcome, Judy. So happy to have you.
Oh, Kati, it's so good to see you and to hear your voice after these many months.
Right. It feels like I hadn't seen you in so long. We were talking before the show started. I was like, Judy, you look great. I think people are really thriving despite the pandemic, and that's a good thing. We'll take it, right? So, Judy, start off by telling the guests whatever story you want us to know about you, how you rose to your career and all the brilliant things you've done. We'll talk about those maybe a little bit later, but what should we know about you that we don't already know about you?
So I was born and raised in New Orleans, actually in a suburb of New Orleans that you may have heard of, St. Bernard Parish, where
Of course.
it was an area that was hit very hard by Katrina in 2005.
Are you a rarity, by the way, being a native and still living there?
No. We, in fact, many people come back here, and besides those who find the wonderful, beloved city of New Orleans, but we have stayed all these years because we truly love not only the food and the music, but most importantly, the people. And so I was raised in a family of four, the youngest of four, and the only girl. My father owned a furniture store on the corner of St. Claude and Desire Streets, like the streetcar named Desire, in the upper Ninth Ward in New Orleans. And my mom was a kindergarten teacher, and then worked for the federal government for many years, and sold Avon to make
Avon, what a name from the past. Wow.
And we all went to school in the city. My parents required that for high school, which you may not know, in New Orleans is a sort of a community that always will be with you for the rest of your life. So I went to this all-girls, 1,200 girls Catholic high school in New Orleans. My brothers did likewise at a boys' Catholic school. And that school has continued to be a big part of my life in many, many ways. And frankly, I went to school at LSU in Baton Rouge for a year and a half, came back and went to University of New Orleans, graduated in marketing and business, and then went straight on to law school at Tulane Law School here in New Orleans. And when I got out, I went with a firm that I had not clerked for, but started with Simon Peragine Smith and Redfearn. And thank you for that wonderful, accurate pronunciation of our law firm name. And I was a commercial litigator there, had extraordinary mentors there, and stayed there as a result for 21 years. At one point becoming the most senior woman and a member of the management committee.
Wow. That's fantastic. I mean, people just don't stay in one place that long anymore.
Yeah. Well, they were the firm that answered the questions in a way that I liked when I was interviewing with them. And it was that they were going to make sure that I got the experience that I was, demanding and needing in order to be the best lawyer I could be. But also, I was very interested in becoming the most fulfilled lawyer that I could be under my terms of fulfillment.
So you said so many important things right there. If you blink, you might miss it. So please go back and listen to what Judy just said, because I'm going to unpack it here in a minute. You said you had terms, and it was about your fulfillment. And I just really want the listeners to really get that. Whatever the market is, whatever is going on in the world, I think I get a lot of lawyers that say, I just need a job. And I just don't think that's sufficient. You don't need a job. You have a career and a life that should blend together for your ultimate fulfillment. So uh, I know this about you, but tell us, like, what drives you that way to, like, even as a young lawyer, like, be so clear about that, really?
Well, I had this extraordinary opportunity to go to Tulane Law School, and I didn't know any lawyers. My oldest brother, had entered law school, but beyond that, I really had never, had lawyers in my life. And as a consequence, it wasn't until I got to Tulane that I understood that not only was being a lawyer a good way to make a living, but it was a way to make a difference. And I recall, and I've told this story, Kati, before, of being in the hallways of Tulane Law School and seeing one of those handwritten posters about an afternoon after school program that was going to be held by one of the student bar associations. And that particular program I, went to, and it was about death penalty, capital work. And I listened to those lawyers on the panel, and I remember particularly one of them. His name was Sam Dalton, and it opened up my mind to really the difference that lawyers can make in people's lives. And from that point on, I think I understood that part of what my definition of fulfillment would be, part of what my ultimately definition of success would be, was going to be, of course, number one, on the family front, being able to dedicate what I wanted to do there to my family. But number two, also being with a group of people, a community at a firm that understood that I would want to do other things. And it's not always easy to ask those questions in the very beginning, but you have your eyes open and your ear to the ground to help understand what a firm is about. And then you can get to be in the place where you start saying, well, this is important to me, and this is what matters to me. And I'm going to do all I need to do and more to contribute to the firm's bottom line. But you must also know that these things are important to me as a lawyer and as an individual.
Wow, amazing. I just want to almost just pause and be quiet so that sinks in for the audience. Because what I gather from what you're saying and my expertise in personal brand development is you just have a clear sense of who you are. When you say what's important to me, that presupposes you know what you are about and your story and your values and what drives you to get out of bed in the morning. And that, I think, would you agree, is very important for us women lawyers, for people, period, for lawyers, period. But really, I think we're so torn in so many directions, especially these days with the pandemic, that we lose sight of, let's just stop for a minute and let's take into account who I am. And this is the brand that sells, by the way. And then you can show up and just say what you said, not with arrogance or with demanding of demands, but really just with clarity and that consistency. And that's attractive, right? That's self-confidence. And that's what I've always gotten from you, Judy, that you're just confident and you're direct and you make things happen.
Well, thank you for those kind words. But I will tell you the one place that demand comes in, and that is to demand it of yourself, right?
Yes.
That you want to do what you're setting out to do, but you have to demand of yourself, whether that excellence, competence, commitment, in order to get you there. I was so fortunate because I did have those opportunities, and I went to a firm where I had people who were receptive to understanding and sitting down with me and having conversations about what was important to me. And the first year after I had started practice there, I started in 1982, in the first summer of '83, I was at my first ABA annual meeting. And that was because somebody in the firm had gotten involved in the young lawyers at the state level and had said, I really think you'd like bar work. And as a consequence, it was my vehicle, my mode of getting involved. Um, but those same individuals, those same partners and mentors at the firm, particularly Bob Redfearn, who's a name partner in the firm, who I still, as a mentor, have lunch or breakfast with every quarter. Even through the pandemic, we've been meeting and getting together. Um, they were the individuals who cared not only on the professional front and made sure I had the opportunities and exposures that were important to me as I saw them, but also that they thought were important for me. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But also on the family front and the personal front. I can remember one of my other partners, Paul Simone, who's now deceased, um, who one day told me very early on in my career that he wanted me to work a case with him. And he was a state, and he was the first lawyer in Louisiana to become also a CPA and
Wow.
held both of those licenses. And he said, I want you to have a case with me at all times. And I said, Paul, I'm a litigator. Why am I going to be working in your world? And he said, because Judy, you should have a case with each of the named partners at every point in your young career, because one day your cheerleader may not be able to be in the room. And you need to make sure that every one of us has been exposed to your work and understands how you work, your work ethic, and otherwise. And it was a great piece of advice.
Wow, I'm reveling in that advice. I hope everyone really got that. What a wise man. And then good for you for taking that advice. And I think that's something that we need to remember. I don't like when women take the stand that men are bad. Look, I do this podcast not because I don't appreciate male lawyers, but I do this because I think as women lawyers, we need support in a different way. And frankly, I love it when the men listen to this podcast, because that is the kind of wisdom that they get and go, hey, that's a good tip. Maybe I should support my junior lawyer as a man with my name on the door or not. But that's a really good way for me to figure out who's got talent and who doesn't, right? Or whatever, however we want to look at it. But so many times we've talked about recently in my other podcast episodes, or generally in groups, I started running this women's support salon just to get women lawyers together, and just because we don't often need mentorship, we need support internally. But we talk about how the men are actually our allies more than we know if we look at them that way. There's a woman, Xiaoyan Chin Dennis, and I met her through the ABA. She is managing partner of K&L Gates in Portland, Oregon. Chinese, right? Grew up in Alabama, not too far from you, in the South. And she said, if I had waited for a Chinese woman lawyer, I would have been waiting for Superman. There were none in Alabama. So she said the white men really supported me, and I appreciated that. So I love that you were open to their support. And that's actually something that you should be really proud of, Judy, as I see. Like attracts like. So that firm wasn't coincidentally there to support you. People just show up in the right places because that attraction, I think, really works. But you were open to it and you took advantage of it, but you gave back too. There's no way that things work just one way. People aren't stupid. If you can't perform when you get there, then things don't work out. So there's that combination, right?
Right. And, but there were so many different examples of when just by looking around and observing and listening, I could find ways in which my career and my life could be strengthened and enhanced. And sometimes that often meant looking to, males and white males, because there weren't senior women around. So, for instance, I used to watch a young partner in the firm who used to announce in the hallway when he was leaving on a certain day of the week to go bring his three daughters to dance at 3:30 or 4 o'clock, and was leaving the office, and he'd say, I'm bringing my daughters to ballet. I'll be back. And he'd come back later after he had their time, his time with them. Well, that gives some license to others to do that. I think he was doing it for himself, but I think he was also thinking, I've got to make this better. I hope he was thinking that. If not, it still worked. And I can remember when I had 4 children under 6, that firm supported me through those times, as they should have, but remarkably so, even more so. I would purposely try to schedule their well checkups all together. And then the treat was to bring them back to the office so that they would sit in my office with those little sticky pads and write on them with colored highlighters, and then stick them all over my windows looking out of the 30th floor of my building. And then they'd get to go to the vending machine, the bad mom I was, and pick out a snack and a drink, and then come back to my office and try to keep them quiet. But I was doing that in part because, number one, it was easier to get all those well checkups done in one session. But number two, because I wanted my firm to understand me as a full person.
Yes.
And I think that is critically important, that we don't try to push those things over to the side. And we women have to be cognizant of that challenge that women today are facing, and men who are taking on duties at home. And we have to afford them the ability to reveal themselves as a full person, whether that's as a parent, as a child caring for an elderly parent, or maybe somebody in their home that has disabilities, whether that's somebody who is caring for the individual themselves, has no one to care for, but they are whole people and they need time for themselves outside of the office to enjoy life, and to find their path forward. And frankly, it can be something that they just need for their own mental health and well-being. But revealing oneself at the workplace, should not have risk. And the sooner we understand that as a profession, the better off we're going to be, because we're not going to lose those talents of women, of individuals who have been fighting the fight on the LGBTQ front, and others.
Oh, so well said, Judy. You have a knack for saying things so eloquently. I think I've told you this before. I quote you all the time. 2 years ago, when you were president and I was past chair of the law practice division, we did the tech show women's program. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I've forgotten.
That was fun. Women in Tech.
Women in Tech, thank you. And you stood up there and you said, women, when you get to the top of the ladder, don't pull your ladder up. And that resonated so loudly with me. And I used it the following year. They invited me to come back and speech. And I said, do you remember last year when Judy said this? And a lot of people did. But this statement, understand me as a full person and afford people the ability to reveal themselves as a full person. That speaks volumes to everything I stand for and go around talking about. And that's why I'm so grateful to do this podcast and have brilliant, wise guests like you on there that show it. Like, look, ladies, whoever's listening to this works. Do not take the excuse that this doesn't work. It does. Here's Judy sitting in front of me. She has 4 grown children. She has a grandchild now. Congratulations on the grandbaby. And she's thriving. And she's made time to be president of the ABA, which is no small feat in and of itself, and to be a litigator. And now she's doing a whole bunch of other things, which we're going to be talking about here in a minute. But the point is, it's because she chose to allow her full self to be revealed. And she demanded that. She says, I like the word demand. It's not a bad word. It's just saying, hey, I am who I am. Accept me for who I am, or don't, but I'm going to choose where I show up and make my time count. And I think that's something we find that most women, I sometimes suffer from this too. We're not in control of our lives, right? And we're running around. And so we can't make those demands of others because we're not clear on who we are. So we can't certainly show up as a full person, and we have no control over it. So we come across as a brand that's really missing that, right? And it doesn't work at all for credibility or for fulfillment purposes.
Yeah. And I think that the thing that someone who has observed or seen parts of my career over the years has to understand is that I was one of the fortunate ones who had an extraordinarily supportive spouse all these years, who was a real hands-on, dad at home he was an entrepreneur. He was somebody who worked full time, yet he managed to, never miss the game. And I would show up on the back end of soccer practice or the pickup side of of dancing, but he was the one who was able to really be the anchor for the family. And I had an extraordinary mother who lived with us for 13 years. And I'd come home, and she was a former kindergarten teacher, as I mentioned
Oh,
earlier. So I'd find her on the ground doing arts and crafts, the children. And I have a mother-in-law who, was very, very much of a team player in terms of taking care of the children, even though she ran a business full time and had an extraordinary dress shop on St. Charles Avenue in New Orleans. So I
support.
had the resources. There are a lot of women who, want to be commercial litigators, who aspire to be on a management committee of a firm, who want that chance to go in a house and work with the C-suite, who don't have the resources. And what we have to understand is that there's going to be moments in their lives, in their days, in their months, in their careers, when we have to give a little, and we have to invest in them by understanding that there are going to be times when their all has to go somewhere else, right? And that's the hard part. But if we treat them with the respect that they deserve in terms of accommodations, what we find is that they'll come back, and they'll come back again, or they'll stay when they thought they couldn't stay because they doubted that they had the bandwidth to do something, to go through a period of time.
And I think that's just a life lesson, right? When you treat people as a human being and put yourself in their shoes. Marianne Williamson says things are cliche because they're often said, but they're often said because they're true. And that's really the truth of it, right? Of humanity. Putting yourself in somebody else's shoes just means just stopping and reflecting and going, I am not even the same gender. I don't have the same beliefs. I've never had children, but I get you because I can just see what it must be like on that end. And I'm going to give a little and invest in you. And it's also understanding that you have to have faith in people, right? If you hire well and if you select well, whether that's your spouse or whatever, it goes a long way. And you just saying, well, I'm going to trust my gut. And, I lead with my gut. When I changed careers from being a pretty successful securities lawyer by all accounts to doing what I do now, people thought I was nuts, but I was like, there is a need for what I do. And lawyers need it, other people need it. So why wouldn't I step up? And that's the same faith-based of, it's not religious at all. It's just about going, I made a decision. I'm going to live by my decision. And I think we don't often do that enough as women on this side, but also as employers of lawyers looking and saying, I chose this person for a reason, so I'm going to give them a little bit of latitude, and just relax a little, knowing the billable will always work itself out. And I really also want to thank you on being so sincere about the fact that you had support, because I think we look for all sorts of excuses to go, oh, Judy, she had people to help her, or look at her, or so-and-so's wealthy, got the nanny, got the chef, got the chauffeur. But despite all of that, and I don't know many women that have all of that, frankly, but I'm sure there's some of them out there. Good for them, right? Good for them, because it's still not easy choosing to make a decision one way or another. And I appreciate you sharing that you did have support. And what do you say to the women that don't have any support? What's the first step for them? Maybe you've already said
To
it, to
seek out
summarize it.
people like you who can help them, and when you share your wisdom, number one. And I think there are a lot of very willing and generous women who are willing to talk things through with people. And that goes well beyond branding in your case, Kati, because you share generously. But I think that one of the lessons there is to ask. And I think a lot of women, and I know I'm generalizing, don't ask because we either fear the answer is going to be no, and it may be. That's right, it may very well be. Or we think there's a weakness in asking. But what we have to understand is not only that's the only way we get what we need and what we want, but it's also the way that we grow as leaders. And I'll give you one quick story on that, back to my law firm of Simon Peragine. I had some very difficult pregnancies, and my first ended up with a hospital stay of 22 days before the baby was born, 6 weeks early, and I was at risk. The second, the doctors told me that if I wanted to keep the baby, that I had to stay the rest of the time in bed. So I called up my managing partner, my mentor, excuse me, and told him that I wanted to cut off my partner's draw. I was a young partner, that I needed to stay in bed and I couldn't work. And it was going to be for the duration, which would be about 5 months.
Wow.
And there was dead silence on the phone. And I thought maybe it was going to be, that's it. Thank you. We don't have a spot for you anymore. And I said, Bob, what's wrong? And he said, well, Judy, I'm trying to sit here and think about if you would do that to one of us if we had a health issue.
Wow.
And he said, if one of us had a heart attack or something. And I said, well, of course not. He said, then why would you think that we would do it to you?
Wow. I got tears in my eyes. It's so moving. It really is.
And so fast forward, and I had that baby, that second one, and then went on to have a third and a fourth. And the third and the fourth, I worked until the day I delivered or went into labor. But fast forward to quite a few years later when a woman in my firm called because she was in a Central American country waiting for an adoption to go through. And she called me, and I was on the management committee. And she said, I've fallen in love with this baby because in that country you can be with the baby while you're waiting for the proceedings. And she said, I can't come home until this baby comes home with me. So go ahead, and if you guys need to cut my draw, just go ahead and do it. There was no need, Kati, for a pause on my part because I knew the answer was going to be, of course, we're going to support you and be there for you. And the management committee will absolutely, I know, say, do what you need to do and bring that baby home.
Wow.
So that's an example of, most likely, I'll admit, I'm not sure I would have had that reaction to that woman those years later, but for my experience with my mentor. And the full circle story here is that she is not only the mother, a single mom of an extraordinary young man who's in his third year of college, I think now, but she is the managing partner of my firm.
Oh my goodness, Judy, it's rare that I'm ever speechless, much less on this podcast, but wow, you've left me speechless because those stories really solidify a lot of what the message that I would hope women lawyers really learn in life, that you can ask, right? If I summarize this correctly, and you can take people's responses at their word, and then you can pass it on. And I think that's really important because I see a lot of women lawyers get hardened, right? When I was in DC, I used to think I was a securities lawyer, right? I mean, it was all male driven, right? Okay, fine. But I thrived in it. But I thought very incorrectly that I'd strap down my chest and straighten my hair because I don't know why I thought curly haired women were not taken seriously, and wear my pantsuit and be a man. And that not only leads to a very inauthentic brand because we're not self-expressing who we are and we shut down as people, and work product has to suffer at that. I mean, I've seen it. I've witnessed my clients go through that. But also, then at that point, you're hardened and you don't allow for other people to have access to the opportunities you had because perhaps you miss seeing those opportunities. Like you were really someone that, please learn this lesson from Judy, everyone. Like you are well aware. You have such self-awareness, Judy, that you caught those things and you were grateful for them. You used them to your benefit and to the firm's benefit and to your client's benefit and to your family's benefit. And then you pass that on. Like, I couldn't ask for a better example of how this could work, women, listeners, to our benefit and to the benefit of society, which is why we went to law school, right? Really?
You know, I don't mean to suggest that I always get it right, and I don't. But it has not been lost on me the number of times that the lessons I've learned have been from men who have forged ahead in this career, and sometimes they have silently suffered because they did not want to ask for those accommodations, yet they knew they were right, and they knew they were fair, and they knew they were just. And so when the opportunity came upon them to make sure that they were had for others, they were available for others, they did that. And that's something that I think that's a lesson that I've learned from them. And even those of us who maybe have faced adversity and have had things go wrong for us, the least thing we can do is to not throw that back at somebody else, right? We need to be thoughtful about that. And we're not always perfect. And that's another thing we have to recognize. when we're not always doing it the right way, and learn from it and move on, and learn from it and get better, and learn from it and help somebody down the road.
Yeah.
And the issue of asking, Kati, if we can just stay on that for a minute,
Sure.
I thought was critically important when I made my transition and move to go in house. Because I was in a place, remember, that I liked, in the firm that I thought highly of and had learned so much, and it was in the management of the firm, and it involved so much there, and they had supported me so terrifically, that why would I go somewhere else and start again? And so I had to ask those questions up front about whether I could continue my bar work, whether I could do it at the levels that I wanted to be engaged in leadership positions of the ABA, chairing, standing committees and other taking on other jobs. So that I put that front and center of my definition of fulfillment and success as I looked down the path of going in house. My employer, who I had never done any work for, I didn't really even know of them, much about them. My employer, Northrop Grumman, I stayed there 12 years. And in the beginning, I was hired for a litigation position in New Orleans that they were creating, a corporate litigation position. But then they asked me to take over a significant portion of the docket for the company, the western half. And they wanted me to go to California. And I said, nope, not at this stage of my life. And then they called back and said, well, this is an experiment, but we'll try it this way. We'll let you work remotely. And then when the company, fast forward maybe 6 years later, decided after its entire history of being in Southern California to move the company headquarters to Virginia, they wanted me to move up there. And I didn't, want to make that move at that point either. I still had children in high school. And they said, okay, we'll see if this works, but it's going to be on you to make it work. And so I was up there, as much as I needed to be, and learned from some really good leaders there, including my general counsel, Sheila Cheston, who currently serves on the ABA Commission on Women. Learned about how important we have to be thoughtful and skillful with regard to remote work and remote management. And those are skills that actually have helped in the nearer days that we've just had. So
yes, absolutely. And then where did you go after you were in house? Tell us about the rest of the trajectory.
In 2014, I was actually waiting to come home in an airport, sitting for one more delayed flight at National Airport, Reagan Airport, and read an article in the Wall Street Journal about a program that just grabbed my heart and grabbed my mind. And it was the Harvard Advanced Leadership Initiative. And I didn't tell a soul except for my husband, didn't even tell my children. I knew exactly that I wanted to pursue that program. Applied, and much to my delight and surprise, because I thought it was a very long shot, I was accepted. And my husband and I moved to Cambridge. I was a resident, full-time resident, fellow in residence at Harvard for a year. That could only have been done again. I walked in and told my general counsel and my CEO of my company, gave them months and months and months of notice in the spring of 2014, and departed in January of 2015 to go do a fellow in residence at Harvard.
Amazing. And then what did you do after that?
Yeah. And I think I just pause there and say that was a hard transition, because I really enjoyed my work as chief compliance officer for a global company such as Northrop. And it was a lot of challenges, and it was extraordinary work. And it was, I was on the Diversity and Inclusion Leadership Council there, and worked very closely on diversity issues with the CEO at the time, and just had a wonderful sense of moving the law department forward. I was on the leadership team for the law department. So it was really a hard place to leave. But it's one of those other sort of thoughts that I'd share with people, and that is, leave at the top of your game.
Yes.
And if you're going to take that next stretch and go do something, think about when you're going to do it. But for this article, I wouldn't have been thinking about it. But once I read the article about this extraordinary program, which I'd recommend to anyone to go undertake, it's about advanced leadership. So it's beyond leadership. It's about the skills and knowledge that's necessary for advanced leadership, and very hands-on. And I took a year of classes, auditing classes at the Kennedy School and at the law school and other places on the other professional schools at Harvard. And it was just remarkable in terms of the breadth and depth that it gave me.
I really appreciate that you were open to it, though, and because a lot of people just get settled, right, and they just go about, and that's okay too. There's nothing wrong with doing what you're comfortable with. But as I always say in my programs, stepping outside of what makes us comfortable every day is how we grow and evolve, and that's really what I teach: transformation, not just change, right? But being able to look at those opportunities and see yourself there, and then applying for it without, even if it is a long shot. Again, it's asking, right? How could it hurt? So that is really tremendously valuable. All these lessons you've taught us. So Judy, let's move to part 2 in the interest of time, because I clearly know I could talk to you probably for hours and we could learn, and maybe we can make this a 2-part. You can come back and teach us something else, because I know you're doing all sorts of new things in the reinvention of your careers of counsel now with the firm and mentoring people and working on other issues. And I think it's fascinating, but I don't want to give that part of your career short shrift. I would love to come back and have you do part 2 and tell us what we can learn on the, can we call it second half of our career? Is that fair?
Fair.
Okay.
After 40 years, 39 years, I guess fair to call it the second half.
So let's move to the second part, where our audience gets so much value from learning about me coaching you through some issue you're facing or a challenge you're facing or something that's on your mind that would be well served talking about.
That's so wide open that it's inviting, because we could talk about several things and do parts 2, 3, 4, and 5 there.
We can do that. Bring it back afterwards. I would love to have you back.
I think one thing, Kati, is helping individuals, and here particularly myself, focus on where I can make a difference, and where I can really drive change. I've been involved in various aspects of the Bar Association, organized bar, and then in community work. And that ranges from death penalty representation to Innocence Project work to 40 years ago probably, Planned Parenthood, serving on that board, to work within the organized bar and its governance at the state, local, and national level. And so now I have this unbelievable moment of pause. I just finished up this month my official duties as an officer of the American Bar Association, and that certainly had my attention for the last many years. And so now I have this pause where I can really think about where I want to take myself, and how I want to spend my energies. And absolutely, and priority, of course, is at this stage of my life is to turn toward self, so I can have a longer contribution, hopefully. Turn toward family, both my husband and my 4 adult children and their significant others, and that new grandbaby that you mentioned. But also just, how do you go about sifting through not only the opportunities that are presented, but again, that what do I think I should be doing? And that has ranged. I'll share with you on a personal level. I'm a big walker, and in the morning, on my very early morning walks, I pass a center that is a center for adults with different abilities, and most of them are adults that have Down syndrome, but not all. A lot of autism. And in my early days, in my neighborhood of about 26 kids in 1 square block in that St. Bernard parish, I lived next door to somebody who had Down syndrome. He just died about 2 months ago. I was at his funeral. But my older brother started a youth organization for people with Down syndrome, and started a summer camp that went on for years. And everybody in the neighborhood, these 21 boys and 5 girls, most of us were all counselors there. And went on to be the local chapter counsel. And then later, when I was a freshman at LSU, I was the state chapter of this youth association um, uh, uh, organization. But I really have stepped away from it for many, many years. So, do I return to that and spend time there, more hands-on, one-on-one work that can be so selfishly fulfilling? Or do I continue to do the policy work and the change work that I'm doing on, the future of the legal profession and re-regulation and all those issues that are so intellectually challenging, and bringing people together, not for any particular change that I would want to see, but to connect people, to have the dialogues that are critically important for not only our profession, but the public? Or do I continue to work on other fronts, in the criminal justice reform area?
So, wow, what a brilliant way to put together that thought and bring it to the table. So, first, I want to thank you for that. If you were my client, this is what I would tell you. I don't think you have to make that decision right now. I would tell you some of the best laid out plans come from just going deep within. And I think you're one of those people anyway, but you're also a doer like me and the rest of my clients. Because let's face it, women lawyers that get somewhere, especially the places that you have been, which is beyond just somewhere, have high ambition and high drive and they're top performers. So we're used to doing, and it's very challenging to slow down. So I meditate every morning. And what I always hear in my head is, and my gut is, less is more, Katy. And I'm always baffled by that. I'm like, how does this work out? And then I realized somebody had written a book about, what's it called? Rest, something about not doing so much. And I really challenge you to slow things down for yourself, Judy. Go spend time with that grandbaby. There's nothing like those small children to put us back into reality, and puppies too, and just dogs in general, into what's real and what the pace of life really can be like. And only then, I find, will you be able to really access deep within you and say, what do I want to do next? And your answer may very well be nothing. And I think that's a brilliant answer too, if it truly comes from your inner being, because that's okay. We don't always have to be out there making a difference. I know that sounds completely irrational coming from someone who's setting up a nonprofit for old dogs, old people, and foster kids, right? Like I have nothing else to do. But but that's really what my inner gut is telling me. But I'm also hearing less is more. So when I sit and I reflect on that nonprofit, I just get all these amazing thoughts. And some of them are like, I'm just going to percolate on that. And I'm not going to pursue that part of it. But that is really where the magic happens. And you may find you want to create an opportunity for yourself that you've never had. Like I started the nonprofit, and I tell my clients that, you don't have to follow somebody else's lead. It's okay. And I'm not saying do it because you have to be the top dog and whatnot, but maybe you'll decide that there's something else. And taking a breath every now and then. And I think you have a good life balance. I'm not saying anything against that. I think you're one of those that probably does, but we could always have better life balance. And the last point I'll make is, I think the creativity flourishes when we do that and just take some downtime and use your tactile functions. I know this sounds like, what is she talking about? But we see all this in play with our executive teams. Like I tell people to color, I tell people to take some clay and mold some clay, or go gardening for themselves, because that allows the left and right hemisphere of the brain to sync up. And then all the brilliant creative ideas come, which makes us, by the way, really good lawyers, because we come up with really good solutions for our clients and for next steps and for creating the leadership model that works. And how do you think I came up with the ABA lawyer retreat? I just remember sitting there one day and I was like, this is a really good idea. And, I can't take credit for all these things, right? Like they just come to you and then you share them with others. And I remember I went to Bob Carlson. I'm like, Bob, I'd like to do this in 2 years. And he was like, wow, like you've already thought of this? I'm like, it just came to me. Like, we got to do this. Like, this will make a difference. But I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just saying it really works that easily. But because we were so driven and we've going to law school is not easy. Let's just face it. Let's call it what it was. For some of us, it was easier than for others. But regardless, it was an endeavor. It was an undertaking. Otherwise, everybody would have done it, right? Let's just say that, make ourselves feel good. But doing things at a slower clip and just really sitting with the notion, I think, is a real smart idea. So here's what I say. Here's your self-work, Judy. Take a piece of paper, write the bullet points of your life story. Really write down, you summarize it very nicely for us, but write some more details of your life story. And then go back and look at that in 48 hours and say, what aspects of my life story would I like to put into motion? Would I like to lead with now at this phase of my life? Would I like to bring out or teach with? And see what comes up, and then take that, write that down, sit on it for another 48 hours. This is the brand being reflective and coming through. And you may find you're going down a whole different path. We don't know until you actually do that exercise. And it always goes back to people's life stories, right? I call it the personal connection story of who you are, which is what you shared at the beginning. But going back and always accessing that story is cathartic. It's so therapeutic, and it allows us insight into who we are so we can evolve. I don't think there's ever such thing as retirement. There's just reinvention. Does that make sense? Is that
It
helpful?
does make sense. Thank you. And it's so thoughtful in the sense that it does make me believe that you can anchor it back. And I mentioned that neighborhood, and in that neighborhood there were literally, I think, 21 boys and 5 girls, and they were all important as friends, and we still are close, believe it or not. But those 5 girls, that was an anchor. And I just realized recently, in talking to some friends in the ABA, and we've all made extraordinary friends, including with your friendship in the ABA, that we realized, a group of us, that we had lost one of our friends recently. We realized that we had never been on a trip together. And so we took a short trip together. And it literally harkened me back to the days in that neighborhood when that circle was an important circle to me. And I realized that had not been around for many, many years. And so I think sometimes the lesson there, if I may share one with you, Kati, is you don't know where you're gonna find that. And what I have found is, these extraordinary people in the organized bar that I've learned so much from and grown so much from. And I just offer that is to women who are looking for a community,
Yes.
as a place to go and be welcomed. And that's probably one of the ways that I can help people, because you've helped me so much today to think through things, is to help them connect and get involved and engaged if they want to. And it doesn't have to be in the oh so busy way that you and I have been involved in the American Bar Association, but there's lots of doors into it, and we can help show you where those doors are. I think they're already opened and waiting for people to come in, but we can show you where those doors are and help people out.
You have your ladder,
Yeah.
and just because you're at the top, you're not going to pull it up. So, Judy, that's a wonderful, welcoming comment. So, if people wanted to get in touch with you, how would they find you? Share that with us, please.
Feel free to email me and email me at JP. I'll give you my personal email.
Okay.
JP Martinez, the number 6 at gmail.com.
Okay, and I will put that in the show notes as well. Any last thoughts? I mean, this has been such a rich interview. I can't wait to go back and listen to it again, and I hope the listeners do the same thing. And I would love to have you back if you can make time for us for part 2. Any last thoughts before I let you go into your very busy day?
No, I just think we all have a stake in this and in what happens to the future of our profession and well beyond, women in general, but particularly our profession. I have a daughter who's now a 2L, my first child to go into law, and I can tell you that I'm not only so proud of her, but most importantly, the opportunity to see her and other women flourish and do well and do better than any of us did. Is what really is a drive for me. I know it will continue to be in the years to come. So we have a stake in this, and the women of our generation need to make sure that we're doing all we can to help those who come after.
Well said. I'm going to leave it at that because there's no better comment to leave with than that. Judy Perry Martinez, thank you so much for being with me. This wraps up another episode of the KTG podcast series, Women Lawyers Making a Difference. Take the information, listen to it, use it to your benefit, use it to the benefit of society, and go out there and be the fantastic women and lawyers and humans that you are. Until next time, KTG signing off. Thank you, Judy.